Welcome to a review of the most important car that Porsche currently makes.
Doesn't look much like a 911, does it? But there's a good reason for that. It's not. It's actually the new Porsche Macan. You see, in 2023, over 27% of Porsche's global sales were down to the Macan, and together with the Cayenne, they took 54% of Porsche's global sales. So they are absolutely indispensable to the company, and without them, there'd be less cash to make things like the 911 GT3 RS, 911 ST, the Boxster Spider RS, all the kind of cars that we dream about. So even if you don't like the idea of this car, you're not interested in it, you better hope it's good. Because if it's not and nobody buys it, then, well, I'm sure I don't need to spell it out to you.
With that in mind, we're going to start with something controversial, because while you can still buy the old Macan as a petrol, this new Macan is only available as an EV. It's a bit confusing, but you can't really blame Porsche for hedging its bets on such an important model. And while we're on the subject of controversy, let's get the bad news out of the way first. The cheapest electric Macan starts at just over £67,000, which is over £12,000 more than the cheapest petrol Macan. And if you compare the entry-level all-wheel drive electric Macan with the entry-level all-wheel drive petrol Macan, it's nearly half a ton heavier.
What we have here, though, is the £95,000 Macan Turbo, although actually this one is more like £118,000 with options. But the Macan Turbo is the top of the range model, so it's kind of the equivalent to the Macan GTS petrol version. But whereas that has 434 brake horsepower, this thing has 630 brake horsepower. As a result, 0 to 62 mile an hour takes just 3.3 seconds, and 0 to 124 miles an hour is in just 11.7 seconds. And that is, in anyone's book, absolutely rapid. Now, admittedly, that 630 brake is only on launch control overboost, but even then, you're still getting 576 brake horsepower at all times. That's the minimum you're going to get, and that means, big surprise. Electric SUV with lots of power is very quick, but it's not just that. It's the way that the speed is delivered. It's a really nice throttle pedal. That's not as easy as it sounds. A lot of electric cars, the throttle doesn't respond as quickly as you'd perhaps want. Teslas are really good at how the throttle is mapped, and actually this doesn't feel too far behind. And also, interestingly, they've got rid of that two-stage transmission that you had in the Taycan, and actually sometimes felt a bit odd where there's a jolt in the middle of the acceleration. In this, they didn't need it. It works perfectly well without it, and it just makes everything smoother.
Every Macan but the base rear-wheel drive car gets two electric motors, one on the front axle and one on the rear, and regardless of which variant you pick, the battery is 95 kilowatt hours usable capacity. In the rear-wheel drive Macan, that means a claimed 399 miles of range, but in this turbo, it's down to 367 miles. Peak charging speed, meanwhile, is 270 kilowatts, meaning it's possible to go from a 10 to 80% charge in about 20 minutes.
That is some seriously rapid charging, but it does rely on you finding a charger fast enough to make it happen. In the UK, you're usually going to be looking at slightly slower chargers, and therefore it'll be more like 30 minutes, but still pretty good going. One thing, though, that you can enjoy about this car all of the time is the interior. Now, Porsche are pretty good when it comes to car cabins, but even by their standards, this is absolutely lovely. It feels really high quality, as you'd expect for the price, admittedly. Got a really nicely crafted steering wheel. The design is great. It's just like the one on the 911. You've got the clock up there with the optional sports chrono package. That looks fantastic. The lovely straight stitching on the dashboard. nice door handles, everything just feels solid, but also nicely designed as well. It's not just a slab of screens in here. Although, I have noticed actually that the headlamp buttons down here, they look like a complete afterthought. They look really cheap. It's not the usual dial where you can turn it on and off like that. It's just some really sort of cheap buttons, which is a shame. But you don't really see them that much, and it is the exception. Aside from that, it's beautiful in here.
All Macans come with a 12.9-inch curved digital instrument cluster and a 10.9-inch central display, but on this car, we've also got the optional 10.9-inch passenger information display.
Now, what's clever with this is that the passenger can happily watch incredibly high-quality YouTube videos, while the driver, when the vehicle is in drive, cannot see the screen because of a special film, so it's not distracting. However, the driver mustn't feel left out, and as such, I've got a head-up display, which obviously no one else can see, but it's a lot larger than other head-up displays, and Porsche reckons it's like looking at an 87-inch TV screen, very precise with that number, at about 10 meters away, and I see what they mean. It does look bigger, but somehow it's not distracting. It's just a really easy thing to glance at, and it's also got augmented reality, so you've got arrows and pointers for when you're trying to take an exit on a motorway, which, having driven in a lot of countries where the confusing signs mean that you're not sure which lane you need to be in, I reckon that will be very, very useful. It's a good feature.
As you'd expect, the Android operating system in the Macan is super slick and easy to use with excellent functionality. There's also an intelligent voice assistant that understands 23 languages in total, a range of colours for all digital surfaces, and super high quality 3D models with environmental details added in. Away from the screens, a communication light across the dash has several different uses, including indicating when the drive mode changes, when the vehicle locks, and if there's an approaching cyclist when you open the door.
However, one of, if not my favourite bit about this cabin is the physical switches and dials that Porsche have put in this car, because it's a lot easier and cheaper to put everything on a big display, and there's enough displays in here for them to do that. But thankfully, they've spent the extra money, and we've got physical switches for the climate control and all the aircon controls really, and the heated seats, cooled seats, and the volume. And actually, they're really nice switches as well. Got a nice feel to them, nicely damped, really good quality. And there's also the volume dial as well, which is very satisfying to use. It's so much easier than just stabbing away at a screen and hoping that you've got the right icon. That, for me, is a big selling point.
In the back, you'll find the longer wheelbase over the petrol car means more legroom, while headroom is also pretty respectable. The boot is a highly impressive 540 litres, and that's bigger than the BMW iX3, and unusually for a car like this, there's even a small frunk that can take a decent-sized suitcase.
Great, so the new Macan can do all the boring, but also very necessary everyday stuff. But then, come on, this is a Porsche. You've bought a Porsche because of how it drives. Doesn't matter that it's an SUV, it's still got to have something about it. So, what is this thing like?
The Macan Turbo gets air suspension as standard, as well as Porsche Active Suspension Management electronic damping control with 2-valve technology. The benefit of this is a much more discernible difference between drive modes thanks to a larger band of ability. Rear-wheel steering is also available for increased low-speed agility and high-speed stability.
Well, I think what really sets the Macan apart from other cars like this is, first and foremost, the steering. I'm not going to say it's bristling with feel, but it's got more feel than I was expecting. It's also a really nice weight to the steering, and the rack is really well judged. It's not too nervous, yet it's also nice and quick. And what it also does is it gives you a lot of confidence about where you're placing the car on the road. And this isn't a small car, it's obviously not a light car, but with that precise steering, you really can be very particular about where it's going on the road, and that really makes a difference. I definitely think the optional rear wheel steering helps towards that. It does make the car feel more stable at high speeds and at low speeds. It's almost like the car is steering before you ask it to. But even without that, the steering is still really pretty spot on. Also, the traction from the Porsche Traction Management and the Torque Vectoring Plus means that you can just plant your foot on the accelerator coming out of a corner and it will sort it out every single time. I mean, it's lovely and dry at the moment, but even if it was raining, I think we'd still have incredible ability.
Interestingly, there's also discernible roll from the car even in the stiffest suspension settings. It's definitely not a bad thing because it feels controlled but also very natural, and there appears to be an acceptance that some movement in the body actually adds a touch more involvement.
Kind of reminds me how with the Ferrari Purosangue and its active suspension, they could have made it completely flat in the corners with no body roll, but they chose not to. They chose to introduce a little bit of roll so it felt more natural, and that's the kind of thing that car makers like Ferrari and Porsche are brilliant at judging, and it's no different with this. I'll tell you one thing though, I do find the seating position in this quite interesting because it's 3 centimeters lower, or it can go 3 centimeters lower than the seating position in the petrol Macan. And I mean, that's great when you're driving down a country road like this one and you want to feel involved in the driving experience like you're in a racing car. But this is an SUV. It's not supposed to be low slung. You buy it because it's high up and then you can go lower. Interesting one, that.
Regardless of how you sit in it, however, there's fun to be had behind the wheel of the Macan. In some corners, it even feels more agile and keener to change direction than the petrol car. The laws of physics would disagree, but Porsche's pulled off some really clever tricks to give the impression of a car that's smaller and lighter than it really is.
But as I pointed out at the start of this video, Porsche wasn't trying to make another 911 here. It's supposed to be a luxurious SUV, and it does do that. There's very little wind or road noise. The ride is really pliant 90% of the time, and actually, if you get the car with a 20-inch wheels, it's even better.
In short, it strikes the balance it needs to between comfort and sportiness, resisting the urge to go too far towards the latter. This car needs to appeal to a broad audience, and on the evidence of today, it should. For Porsche and its Halo 911 models, the Macan is a means to an end, but that doesn't make it any less capable or desirable.
But you know, the most important thing is that if you buy this car, you're helping to make more 911s and Caymans and all those other more exciting cars that Porsche produce. I'm not saying that this isn't a fun car, but you just know that when you do spend your money on this, you're contributing to the greater good, as it were. It's kind of like a crowdfunding effort, but instead of just, you know, your name on a plaque, you actually get a car in return as well. It's great value if you think of it like that.